Hi, this is Sherry Veronica. The Seventh-day Adventist Church was pushed into the limelight because of a member of that denomination that came out to talk about his life and his medical issues, and we all have to assume it was talking about itself because it is an impossibility, the things that he has suggested, except that he's talking about himself. He was the intimate partner, the lover of Denis Lowe. Denis Lowe has since died from HIV/AIDS, all the complications in the body because the immune system is wrecked, and Denis Lowe, died from AIDS, okay? And this person who was the lover of Denis Lowe, who now is affected and he has the virus, he came on social media to talk about records that are impossible for him to have. Now, he talks about what he found in the records, but what people are waiting for are the details, like names and the dates, those dates on the records, and other things that would, cause people to say, hey, that didn't happen. He even described people as being dark skinned and heavy set and that kind of stuff. It's like he has gone mad. He talks about bipolarism, but for a person whose father killed his mother, being bipolar ain't that bad. If that's the case, if he's talking about his family having bipolar in their family because he's talking about himself, the fact that there's also murder in his DNA and then abuse because a child, him, was jettisoned in the gutter, thrown out in the street. When they say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, that was not for him. He went out with the bathwater. So for him to start talking about all of these things, people are just waiting for the details and the facts to come out. We want to see the records. People want to see the records. But be that as it may, this guy is a member of the church, Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I question the cultism in that church and how people in that church seem to have a proclivity to lie. They're like, they just lie. And like the biggest liars, the biggest deceivers, you will find them in maybe all churches, but the Seventh-day Adventist Church, there's something off with the people who go there. If you watch it, you will see it. And if you go to it, you will see how they try to tell you, don't do this, don't do that, don't look at this, don't look at that. They are real cultish in the way they preach to the audience, okay? So this came in after I have brought up a post about cultism at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and someone is saying, as for your exposing the connection between organized crime and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, you are correct. Evidence in front of me suggests church and financial fraud, and there is a sex ring running in it as well. I want to talk. They started to talk about someone who wears the banner of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who's also a deacon, but the person is robbing people, just deceiving people. The person will come and do shoddy work, not because they cannot do good work, but because, leaving with someone's money, that is good organized criminality, okay? It's nothing bad in terms of criminality about doing what this person does, and they call them criminal competent. They're competent being a criminal. So pretending to be honest but stealing people's money, that is something you hear a lot of people complain about when they're dealing with Christians on the whole. If you say you are a Christian, you are a suspect right away. You are actually telling people to be wary of you. But then they talk here about the sex ring side of it, and they're saying that some people go to church and they call it dating. There's a roundabout of in-church dating, but it's actually like a sex ring. It's some people, and even the guy who confessed to being, the HIV positive, he came out and he said a whole lot of things, but he means himself. And when he talks about having 3 daughters, he never supported any of them. He never supported any of his daughters. I'm surprised that any of his daughters would stand next to him in unison. I'm actually surprised about that. But anyhow, that is something that happens in Barbados. It's like there's a syndrome, okay, that where people identify with people who abuse them. Okay, it's just something that happens there. But yeah, when they talked about in-house dating, that was something that was said about this same guy that is HIV positive. These people go to church to find women to take home, to bed. And if that happens, this person would need to be in the Nelson Street area picking up, having to pay for it. But they were talking about in church dating. It's spoken about as dating, but there is obviously more going on. And that's the sex ring side that they talk about with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And they're saying that someone was recently installed. Roger Gibson's wife's son was recently installed at the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He's from Dominica to administer things there in Barbados. And they are like forced to conform, like in lockdown. And people are going to be watching to see what happens there. But this particular church is at Britain's Hill, the Seventh-day Adventist Church at Britain's Hill in Barbados. And they talked about the deacon, as I said. They talk about his mom is from St. Lucia. She's a caretaker. And all of this is coming about because I think, did I say his name? Patrick King. Because Patrick King came online, social media, with a terrific lie, and he thinks he's embarrassing someone's name that he inserts in there, but it's not so, because everyone who has a brain will know he's talking about himself, especially since he was the lover of Denis Lowe. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows the bisexuality of this particular guy. Everyone knows he's talking about someone going this way and that way, and this boys and this women or whatever, but that's him. That's him. He's a bisexual guy, and he's very popular on Facebook or wherever, but he has his audience, and when he talks, he's talking about himself. When he speaks about himself. But what he also did was make people pull up, and I'm going to bring that to you separately. They pulled up Denis Lowe's files. They're going to pull up his files from the time, people were moving with him, and his nicknames and whatever else. His files are being pulled. The women who had children from him, people can't even believe that that he fathered that a female will allow that to happen, but it did, and it has happened, and all of that is going to come up. He's always off the island trying to seek medical attention, trying to seek medical care. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but people are on their pins and needles. They just want to see the evidence. People just want to see the evidence of his records. They want to see dates. They want to see names. They want to be able to trace back, to see when people were on the island, when they were not on the island, who was married to who, people, how dark was the person he's talking about, and how fat was, heavy set was the person he's talking about married, when the person's name that he inserted into the file was never married in Barbados. It's all a ruse, but people are still interested. And so am I. I'm very interested in seeing the dates on these things and the people who signed off on these things. It's going to be very, very interesting to see those medical records and how a name could be inserted. People could see the fraud. We're going to be able to see the fraud, okay? And people could come up with, tax records and that kind of stuff. But we are just waiting to see that evidence, okay? And because he goes to the Seventh-day Adventist church, that church has been brought under review, and people know it to be a cult. They know it to be, a place where there's financial fraud. That has always happened at the Seventh-day Adventist church. Financial fraud and sex improprieties. There's a sex ring now, people are saying, but there's always been sexual improprieties. In fact, maybe a year or two ago, I did a blog about something that happened at the Seventh-day Adventist church with someone, but you can go and search for it. I'm not even going to talk about that. But it's always been the case. It's always been the case. There's something cultish, it's like a cult. There's some churches you can go to, the pastor preaches and you go on home, but even in your food and what you eat, they're always telling you what you should do and what you shouldn't do. It's cultish, okay? And when this guy came out to say that he has medical records, he talked about himself and what he put women through, and then he involved animals and young people. He talked about himself. We just want to see the records. We want to see the records, okay? And in the meanwhile, we have Denis Lowe's records, his lover's records, and we know that Denis Lowe died from AIDS. This is Sherry Veronica.
Help me spread the word about Naked Departure via social media. Subscribe and share to show support and love for our channels.